Hi, my name is Christina, and here's my Typography 1 final culmination project. So, my inspiration for this project was Elizabeth Cotton's song Home Sweet Home. Pause now and listen to this song on YouTube. So, Elizabeth Cotton was born into a musical family in 1893 near Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She had to drop out of school at a really young age to become a domestic worker and support her family. She taught herself how to play music on her brother's banjo, but she had to play it upside down because she was left-handed. She then was able to save up her money with the help of her mom and buy her first guitar at the age of 12, at which time she started writing her own songs. She did get married at 17 and began having children and had to stop playing music in order to continue her domestic work and caring for her family. It wasn't until her 60s when she was working for the famous Seeger family as a nanny and they discovered her musical ability that they encouraged her to record her songs. Peggy Seeger took some of the recordings to the UK, where a musical group there that consisted of white men misappropriated one of her songs as their own composition, copywriting it, and it became a hit. It was only properly credited to Cotton many years later, and she only started performing her music and receiving acclaim in her 70s and 80s. Her music, specifically Home Sweet Home, which was my inspiration, is rich, layered, technical, bright, warm, thoughtful, quick, colorful, complex, and expressive. I wanted to bring those qualities into the project that I did. So I started leaning towards doing embroidery on a photograph. I wanted to use bright, colorful threads that stand out against a black and white photograph, which you can see here, and the lines that radiate from her central figure as if she is the sun, producing the beautiful music and enveloping the viewer in her warmth. For my piece, I take a photograph of Elizabeth Cotton when she was in her 80s playing guitar, and on top of it, I'm going to embroider a woman's work, which is part of an old rhyme. Man may work from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. It's a reference to the fact that women have historically worked long hours of unacknowledged and unpaid labor, making sacrifices to take care of the home and family. I think this is very applicable to Cotton's life. She put aside her music career for nearly her entire life, and then when she finally did start recording music, she initially received no credit or recognition for it. This is also drawing attention to what is traditionally considered a woman's work in a patriarchal and misogynistic society, whether it is embroidery, which I used here, nannying, raising children, doing housework, or making music and following one's passion, like Elizabeth finally did late in her life. When gathering the resources for this project, I wanted to keep in mind the kinds of things Elizabeth might use in her day to day, or how she might approach creating something new with the very limited income and resources she experienced most of her life. I chose to use all upcycled materials that I purchased from a thrift store on Half Price Saturday. The yarn and string used for embroidery, the dress that I cut up to make the mat, and the picture frame were all secondhand. I chose to use a simple embroidery backstitch to make the letters because this is a very common stitch used when hand sewing and repairing garments, like Elizabeth might have done at some point in her domestic work. I chose to leave a tail on the final letter unfinished as if to continue the phrase, "A woman's work is never done." I wanted to use fabric for the mat because upcycled clothes that can no longer be worn were often used for other things like making blankets. It adds a decorative flair while still being true to the roots of the piece. It gives a homey warmth, and the strawberry and plaid patterned dress it came from reminded me of something Elizabeth might have worn as a child in North Carolina. Here's a final close-up view of my finished piece with the fabric mat and the unfinished thread hanging down from the K. I chose to put it in this thrifted frame that's a light unfinished wood color because it didn't distract from the image. The target audience for this piece is somebody who's a fan of traditional folk music who may be familiar with Elizabeth Cotton's contribution to the music scene and also values an accurate portrayal of history in folk music. My piece calls attention to the imbalance of invisible labor that women, and especially women of color, bear, and the way that their work and effort is often erased from history, especially by white men. This would also appeal to fans of the general history of music or people who wish to learn the stories of African Americans in the early 1900s. If this piece were displayed in a museum alongside the history of folk music in America, it would reach its target audience. It would also fit at a music venue that predominantly features folk bluegrass musicians or in the Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame in Boston. On this final slide, I included my rationale, which is basically everything that I covered in this presentation. Thank you so much for viewing. Please reach out if you have any questions.